Please be advised, this podcast is for informational purposes only and should not be considered health, tax, legal, or professional advice. We are not responsible for any losses, damages, or liabilities that may arise from the use of this podcast.
And now, I talk back with Ray
I'm telling you, I couldn't make it up if I tried.
and Mandii.
You've got to be freaking kidding me.
You know what? That's all I'm saying.
Hello. Welcome back to another episode of I Talk Back with Ray and Mandii. I am Mandii, and this is... We are joined...
Ray.
Yeah, Ray.
Ray.
We are joined today by a very special guest. I have the honor of actually working with him one day a week. He subleases from my job, so it's awesome to be able to see him in person, live in person. Felix Barnhart. He is a licensed... I can't even talk. He is a licensed social worker, clinical social worker. And so, yeah, we are joined by him today. So thank you so much for being on the show with us. We really, really appreciate you.
It's my pleasure to be here and just chat with you guys.
Yay!
Awesome. I've read your website and your profile, and I have tons of questions. I'm new to starting to see like a counselor, or she's a therapist. You got to tell us the difference. But yeah, so it's been very enlightening.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So tell us a little bit about yourself. Tell us a little bit about yourself.
Well, I'm a licensed clinical social worker. I grew up in the Rio Grande Valley. That's where border town.
Mm-hmm.
And I moved to Austin in 1993 to go to UT, and I never looked back.
Yeah.
I met my husband in 1996, and we've been together for a very long time. And my previous experience was working for a school district, Leander ISD. I worked there for 20 years. I helped establish their mental health program, along with some great coworkers of mine who are lifelong friends. And after 20 years of doing that and putting in the hard work, I decided to branch out on my own.
Mm-hmm.
And Mandii, you know about that process because you were involved in the process of me taking the leap. And it was a big leap because I was real close to retirement.
Mm-hmm.
And I took that leap, and I'm really grateful now.
Yeah.
I'm really, really grateful.
Yeah, it was awesome to see you convert to your private practice, because I know it's scary and you had done it for so long, but it was like you were working for somebody else, right? And as we both, saw you through that transition, you had to figure out everything. Like, how do I get started? Where do I start? I mean,
yes.
Felix is leasing 2 different spaces, which is awesome, for 2 different client types. So it's great that he even did that. Not only did he lease 1 spot, he did 2.
Let me tell you, yes. And both of the agreements are kind of like, I don't get charged unless I see clients, which was great because, Mandii, at first I didn't have that many clients, and now I am booked and busy.
Yes.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
Yeah. And I absolutely love that. And it's great it was at one point, he was only there like half a day, and now he's there longer. And I absolutely love that for him. I love that he has a space that his clients can come to, that they feel safe in, and that he can see them and help. And I'm so happy and so grateful that you did not retire, because there's still people that need you.
Thank you.
Yes.
I appreciate that.
Yes, absolutely. So I did have a question. I know you'd been doing this for a really long time. What made you even get interested in being in social work and then going off into the area that you decided to go to?
That's a great question. And one that I share once I develop trust and rapport with my clients. Mm-hmm. My mom suffered from pretty profound mental illness. She was diagnosed with schizophrenia.
Mm.
And my mom was the first one in her family to get a college degree, the first one to get a master's degree. And she comes from a big family of 8, and she's one of the oldest siblings, but every single person followed in her footsteps.
Wow.
So she broke this generational ceiling.
Yeah.
And then she developed serious mental illness when I was about in the third grade was her first hospitalization. And from then on, she had a real struggle, and she ended up dying and passing when I was 28 of breast cancer. But I tell everyone that she really died of mental illness because she noticed the change in her body, but because of her mental illness, she did not seek care until it was really too late.
Wow.
Yeah.
And so even though cancer took her, schizophrenia really took her life and changed her life more than cancer did.
Yeah.
Mm.
Yeah.
And so that was initially how I got into it and why I was so interested in it. It was selfishly to work through some of my stuff and kind of what I wished I had growing up. That's why I started in schools and working with kids.
Oh my God.
And now it's evolved to like a bigger, larger meaning of just helping people.
Yeah.
Mm.
Wow.
That's
Yeah.
awesome.
Yeah, that's so awesome. And I feel like that's kind of like a trend that I see too. Because like when you have a family member or somebody close to you that you feel like either you wish you could have helped, or you see that maybe they didn't have the resources or the help available to them, you kind of want to be like a voice for them even after the fact, you know, and then you want to help people so they don't have to feel like you felt when things were going wrong or things were happening, that you were younger, you know, you didn't know how to control certain things or how to even navigate certain things. And so it's great that you did that, because I mean, you know, that's needed.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And even though it's really hard work, it's built-in meaning. Some people have to kind of like search for meaning in their jobs. I don't have to search for meaning. Every single person that I meet with, I'm able to significantly affect their life. And who gets to say that, right? And so it's hard work, but it's really, really meaningful. And therefore that's kind of what keeps me going through the hard times.
Oh yeah.
Because I have a question for you in general. So in your profession, what do you normally see, or what have you noticed from your clients that as far as people's reasoning for seeking out help? Because a lot of times when, you know, in our communities, in our culture, it's just so taboo to even say, I need help. I'm struggling with something, that I need somebody to come in from, you know, outside looking in to help me with my unpack my stuff, you know. So like as far as what from your experience, what do you see when people finally make the decision to actually seek out therapy and counseling services?
Most of the time, but not all the time. Most of the time, they're noticing a change in either a relationship or their functioning. So they're noticing that, okay, it's gone beyond worry and sadness. Now it's starting to affect really important areas of my life. Or they've gotten feedback from their loved ones, like it's really time to get some help. Some help. After the pandemic, the main thing that people were coming to me and my colleagues was anxiety. And so they were coming to me to manage anxiety, and very quickly we were able to break that down to the root of a lot of their anxiety, which usually resides in some form of trauma. So even though they come to me for anxiety and or depression, most of the time my work, or coming to me from BNA, coming to me to explore their relationship with food,
Mm-hmm.
even that we can break down to some form of trauma.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
So
Yeah.
ultimately, I do trauma work.
Mm-hmm.
That's awesome. Yeah, 'cause I had obviously had my own reasons for seeking out therapy, but I don't know if it was more like a change in myself. It was more like I was tired of myself. You know, like when you get tired of repeating patterns and you're the only common denominator, I'm like, well, at this point, I can't say it's anybody else. Like I have to figure out myself, like, because I'm the only common denominator in all these relationships. So yeah, I had to like, you know, that's why I was like, look, I'm tired of this.
Yeah.
I'm tired of me. So yeah, so
Yeah.
I got tired of hearing my own story. So I had to like figure that out.
And I feel like, Ray, that's really powerful for somebody to have that level of insight. But also, you'll hear many people kind of like common sayings in therapy.
Mhm.
And one of which is the only person you can control is yourself. So regardless of your situation, you know, the only power of change that you have is over yourself.
Yeah. So true. And she does, we do, and I was looking at your website and you do a lot of, it was an acronym, EDMR.
Almost. It's EMDR. Yes.
EMDR. Okay. So I don't know what that is, but I know it says that EMDR, and then also said talk therapy.
Yes.
And so my therapist mainly does talk therapy, and because you just kind of figure it out on your own, you know, like it's kind of funny when you listen to yourself. But what exactly is EMDR? I said you have like a certification, but like what is EMDR?
So EMDR stands for eye movement desensitization reprocessing. And it's a very specific type of trauma therapy. And it's really interesting how it was developed. The person who developed it was a psychologist in New York City. Her name is Dr. Francine Shapiro.
Okay.
And her story is really interesting. She got the news from her doctor that she had terminal cancer. And she was obviously really struggling with that. She took a walk in Central Park. And even though nothing in her life changed, after that walk, she felt better. And she just started being curious, like, what about walking? You know I suggest that to my clients all the time, but she started being even more curious and breaking down what about the act of walking helps somebody. And she broke it down to the bilateral stimulation that we like, you know, when you're walking, you don't realize it, but you're looking from side to side.
Okay.
So that you don't trip over anything, right? You're looking and you do that and you don't realize it. But what she found is that if you introduce trauma in a specific way, because that started her whole research into trauma therapy, and you activate the bilateral stimulation, it's the brain's natural way to start healing. So she developed this script for therapists to use, and initially it was used in with veterans coming home from war with PTSD. That's why we associate so much of the word trauma with like PTSD and like people going to war.
Okay.
You know, and then they realized that modality worked for anybody with trauma, and now it's so widely used. In fact, when there are school shootings, they'll do a request to EMDR therapists to go and work with children on day one. And so it's eye movement desensitization, which is really helpful for those victims of trauma to get desensitized to it, so it's not so activating. And then you reprocess the trauma so that you learn that it was no fault of your own. Because most people who experience trauma inevitably blame themselves in some,
Mm.
and that's really the lasting effect of a trauma. Is it starts making them second guess themselves. It starts making them feel really unsure of themselves. And so we reprocess their trauma to unlearn that, desensitize to the triggers,
Mm-hmm.
so that it no longer happens in the body. And
That's interesting.
I
Okay.
know. And the real mystery to it is they still don't realize why the bilateral
Mhm.
stimulation is the gateway to that.
Mhm.
So it's got a level of kind of mysticism to it. In fact, when EMDR first started, like people were like, what kind of therapy or therapist does that? That's like woo-woo therapy. That's like out
Yeah.
there. But now it's so well researched. It's one of the most common modalities that people seek out when they're looking for therapy. But it's totally different than talk therapy, conventional.
Okay. So you mainly do, it seems like you mainly like deal with trauma and I guess like your relationships with food or people or that kind of thing. Do you ever I saw you do couples counseling as well?
I do. It's not something that I do very often just because I have to. For me, there's certain types of therapists, certain things in therapy that just require a lot of energy on my part.
Mm-hmm.
And couples is one of those.
Yeah.
Just navigating and holding space for what people go to couples therapy for requires just something more of me. So I only take a certain amount of couples because it's like taking on, for me, it's like taking on like 3 clients in one.
Okay.
And
It's
that's what
heavy.
and I was going to ask you that too, like, because when you're doing this type of service for people, and if you're an empath or if you can receive energy like that, you pretty much pull in what they're putting out. And I can see how being with a couple, especially if they're going through really, really trying times, you can have double that happening at once. And so that can get really heavy.
I can certainly see the three people because you're dealing with 2 individuals plus them as a couple.
Right.
And like, so you have like literally 3 things you got going on. Like I started watching that show Couples Therapy, fell in love with it. That's why I decided to go to therapy. I'm not even a couple yet. I need therapy. I need couples therapy. But like,
girl, they could be singles therapy, girl. There's singles therapy. Right. It's okay.
I was like, now I'm a couple, so it's nice. But like, yes, we're definitely gonna have to go to counseling.
Yeah.
I told him we needed counseling, and he said, already? Like nothing is really wrong. But like I think it's just healthy to get to get a baseline.
Yeah, and breaking down that stigma that it's a bad thing.
Right.
You know, like what's wrong? Like
that was the initial reaction was what's wrong? I was
yeah. Right. This could be a really good thing, just a really supportive space for us.
Mm-hmm.
To be curious.
Yeah. And to also learn how to communicate too, right? Like learn how to communicate with each other. And because sometimes you're not comfortable saying how you feel, depending on how long you've been in the relationship. You know, Felix has been with his husband for what, 30 something years, right?
It's been 29 years. I can't remember, but the last time, I've gone to the point where like I forget. Like I post on social media, and my husband.
It's so long. You're like,
it's not 28, it's 29, and I'm like, oh, sorry.
But I feel like it's the same exact time like Donnell and I have been together, because Donnell and I met in 1996 too. And so,
oh wow,
yeah. So when you get to a point in your relationship to that point, you're pretty much fully comfortable, and you learn how to communicate with each other because you know each other's buttons, you know what not to push, you know what sensitive subjects are to them, and what not to say. So you learn them inside and out. But when you're earlier in the relationship, you don't really know all of that. And so it's like learning at the beginning how to communicate, even forming a friendship at the beginning is so important. So so like Felix said, it's not a bad thing. Like you should absolutely go, even if you don't have issues going on.
We're older. I mean, we're like, we have our own issue just from being older in our own space. So like
ways.
Yeah, like Yeah, because you know I like my stuff where it's at. I don't.
Yeah,
I
because
don't want you moving
Rashawn
it.
don't like to share her closet, Felix. That's the problem. She don't like
Well,
to.
I have a whole other side of my closet now. So I have his and her, it's his and hers. I moved my stuff. I moved my stuff away from his. So it's empty now. So oh yeah, it's interesting. Like I so we had a first. Because you would love this. So we had our first like cookout together. And I've never been with a man before that likes to cook. I've always been the one that likes to cook. You know, never even had anyone give me an opinion
Mhm.
about anything. Well, he really enjoys cooking. So we were at the grocery store together, and he's telling me which potato I was getting the wrong potatoes for potato salad. I was
And
like,
you're like, what?
I've been cooking for a very long time. No one has said anything about potato salad, and it's just, but it is like I can tell like he was trying to like tell me in a nice way, like, well, babe, I mean, I'm just gonna give you a suggestion. Is that okay? And I was like, what? So we're like, I'm like, I've been pushing the basket. Just give whatever potatoes you want. So yeah, that's probably why we do need counseling. But but it's different when you're like, y'all been together like forever with your spouse and you know them and but when you're like, I'm 46, he's 49. So
Mhm.
when you have somebody that even have been married before and have adult children and young children, like it's a lot of meshing, that you have
Yeah. And
to
there are
deal.
certain things in life that are lifelong journeys, right? Like
Yeah.
you could always communicate better. You could always get more vulnerable with your significant other. And there are different sets of like problems that come with newer couples, and like older couples tend to get very, very set in their ways. And if you throw a curveball at someone who's really, really set in their ways, it could really cause a domino effect in the relationship. So
Yeah.
I think that I hear you, but there's certain areas like you don't, especially someone that grew up in Texas in the South, like you're like you don't
You
criticize.
don't tell me how to cook.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
there's one thing you not gonna do. Let's just set that rule right now.
Not the
But
potato
it's
salad.
also
Not
like,
not the potato salad. Yeah.
exactly. Like there's just some things like I just don't care about. Like there's some things that I'm just like, I
Mhm.
don't care. It's not that serious. But then there
Then
are
cooking
things that
comes into
I just
play.
have to. The what?
So then cooking comes into play.
You see? And I just have never ever in my life talked to anyone that cared, any man that cared about cooking.
Yeah.
They were just happy that I was cooking.
So
You
that's
I
know?
think
different.
that's
That's
kind of
different for you.
cool.
Yeah, I told him I'm just gonna sit back and just let him cook because I think he has a very particular way to do them, and he really enjoys it. I think that's part of his like even when we talk on the phone, he's like, "Babe, should I make beef tips over rice or dirty rice and sausage?" And I was like, I'm not eating it. Like we have our own separate house. Like I don't know. But it's just neat that he really enjoys it. So I have to like learn in my older age to and
Sounds
not
like
care so much about
look,
everything.
sounds like a good date for y'all would be a cooking class. I'm just saying. Cooking or baking, girl.
No, I'm just gonna sit and look because then he'll be trying to tell the instructor how to cook something. So I'm just gonna sit there and be cute, like he's saying. I'm just gonna be cute.
I like that. I like that idea. Or just be like, okay, you make potato salad and I'll be the critic.
Mhm. That's right. Yeah,
Let's
Okay,
make
try
I have a
those
good question for you, Mr.
and
Felix.
let's see what happens.
Exactly. Okay, I have all my little questions like written out for you because I just think in our culture, it's just like therapy is just so taboo. So, what do
Yeah.
you think? Um, the key components of a successful therapy session are like whenever you meet somebody and then you build the trust, like you talked about earlier, and then they start going to therapy, right? And then when you feel like you've had a good session, because sometimes the session will end and you're like, I'm not done, I'm not ready for it to end yet. Like, have you ever like had that happen? Like, you just get to going and your time is up.
Oh yes. That there's a word for that of what generally happens is a client will drop a bomb with the last 5 minutes. It's called door knocking. And they'll drop right before they reach for the doorknob, and they're like, and by the way, this happened. And you're like, what? But I think there's certain things that the therapist brings, and there's a certain thing that the client brings. I think the therapist creates a emotionally safe space. So they are working on all these soft skills that come with experience and the education behind a licensed therapist to hold space and really reserve judgment and bias and be really aware of kind of what's going on for me so that I can show up for you in the way that you need me to show up for you. And how often do you get an interaction with another adult who does that, spends so much time and energy making sure that you have an emotionally safe space, regardless of what you're bringing? And a lot of times, like, stuff that they're bringing is shocking, you know, even though I do this and I've done this for so long, like, you know, and wouldn't that be horrible if you came to your therapist and you're like, and then this happened, and they're like, oh my God, like, like that would just be like, whoa, you know, I don't know if this is that just feels very judgy, you know? And so the therapist brings that, and then the client brings their access to vulnerability. Once they are able to feel safe, we got to go to that soft spot, and you have to take that leap of faith that you can be vulnerable with someone and not get hurt, because there's always risk for that, even with a experienced therapist. You know, I always have to be really honest. My hope is that things get better. I definitely don't want to make things worse, but I can't guarantee that won't happen.
Yeah.
And relationships change once you go into therapy. Your relationship with yourself, but also what people notice is their relationship with other people become much more clear. And sometimes that means change. And that can be really hard.
Yeah, I changed a few things.
Yeah.
I had to block some people. I was like, this is not even serving me anymore. Like, you know, because then you do have a little more clarity. You know, I think is what it is. So I was totally agree with that. So I used to date an attorney, and he was like he worked for the county. He was one of the DAs, but he made a comment once that if you go to therapy, if you've been to therapy for like 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 years, like every 2 weeks, he said, if you've been to therapy, because it was important to him that whoever he was dating was in therapy. But his question was, well, how long have you been in therapy? Is it working? And he made a comment that he felt like if you've been in therapy that long, that consistently, that it wasn't working. How do you feel about a comment like that?
I agree and disagree, because my whole role I see is working myself out of a job. And I like the idea, especially in this day and age with how much therapy costs when you're paying out of pocket, and even copays, that usually people get therapy in little packages. You know, they go and then they feel better, and they kind of, and then they have a therapy home that they can revisit. They generally tend to be my more privileged clients for whatever reason. They have more access to resources that have just said to me, I'm going to, you know, like, as long as I'm alive and kicking, I'm going to come to therapy with you. This is my commitment to myself. And I'm going to do that with you. But, you know, once you've been with someone for so long, you can hit plateaus, you know, where it's just kind of like, it's just like regurgitating what's happening in your life and just kind of like venting. And it's not necessarily.
Yeah. That was he said. He said you're just basically having a friend session if you've been seeing them for 10 years and you're like, are you not making progress?
Mm-hmm.
Then you're just chit-chatting with a friend and paying for it. So he's like, I just don't think at that point he made a comment that like you should be getting some tools on how to deal with things versus having to like where you shouldn't be in the same position you were 10 years ago, going there every 2 weeks. He just thought it was kind of interesting.
And I do have to be really aware of that because a lot of clients will develop this trust where they start asking me really direct questions about what they should do. And any therapist that tells you what you should do, be aware and cautious of that because my role is to not disempower you or make you second guess yourself or say that like, I can't, what does Felix say before I have to make a major decision? Like he has to approve this, then you're dependent on me. And that's not helpful to anybody.
Yeah. Well, then my therapist said that. She's like, I'm not going to ever tell you what to do. Yeah. She told me that. She's like, I'm not going to tell you. She said, but I'm going to give you some tools to help you figure out the right thing for you.
And some people get upset when they're like, what am
just tell me what to do.
If you don't just tell me what to do, I thought that's the whole point.
Because people like us, like people like that, because I'm like this a little bit, because I'm good at following directions. And so I'm like, if you just tell me what to do, I'll do it. But if you just leave me to my own vices, who knows where I'm going to end up.
So walking that fine line of telling someone what to do, but providing them with supportive strategies that are concrete, you kind of have to be careful because sometimes it's a lot easier to just tell someone, dump him. Or what are you doing with this person, that keeps hurting you over and over again. It'd be so much easier, to do that.
Yeah. But then it's like at that point, you're not letting them figure it out. So they're never going to get that skill to learn how to manage that without, like Felix said, somebody needing that confirmation or the information from somebody else, And then if you're telling them what they should do, it's basically going based off what you feel like you should be doing in those situations, and that's not really who they are. So
and what happens with if you tell someone what to do and it doesn't work out?
They blame you. You did this is what you said. I can totally see that happening. Have you ever had to like dismiss a client, Felix, where you're like, this is not like we're not meshing, or you're not helping them, or you're like, I think you would be better with someone else?
Yes. And not necessarily for the reason of us not matching. Maybe it's just because I have been in spaces for so long where I do have to navigate around so much privilege, so much heteronormativity, so much stuff. Like it makes me pretty adaptable. So even when I'm working with someone who's really far away from my own values, I'm generally able to work with them. However, when it's outside of my scope of expertise, that's where I feel really comfortable saying, I have been really privileged and honored to provide you with the journey to here. But moving forward, you're going to need a specialist in this area. And I'm not going to be able to help you with that journey. But I have to be really honest with you. Like, this is what I think you might need. And like referring them to either a higher level of care, like intensive outpatient treatment or partial hospitalization, or like a specialist, especially a specialist when it comes to substance abuse. Because therapists, LCSW is a kind of a general licensure that allows you to treat basically anything. You can treat substance abuse, you can treat serious mental illness, but you have to identify when something is outside of a generalist
Oh, God.
You know, concern, and that requires specialized treatment, just a therapist that just does substance abuse, you know, or whatever they need.
Like if you, like you can see your primary care, an internist for high blood pressure, but when it becomes out of control, you need to go see a cardiologist. Like at that point,
Right.
yeah, so you just need to see it.
Exactly.
Totally makes sense. That's awesome. Okay, man, I'm sorry, I don't mean to like monopolize.
No.
I love therapy. I just love it. It's so fascinating to me.
It really is. And I feel like just because, I mean, all of us are in the community service-based fields. So it's like just helping other people and making sure people get what they need, you know, and being passionate about that. It's filling, you know. So I get it. But I did want to go back to Rashawn's question because I am curious, what's the difference between counseling and therapy?
That is a good question. And this is how I kind of frame it. Most people will use the term counseling when they're trying to minimize or avoid therapy. So like I have this client, this male client, he is Latino, and he has to call me his life coach. He cannot call me his therapist. And I'm like, I do have a problem with life coaches, by the way, but let me just tell you this, not a problem, but like it's unregulated.
Yeah.
You know, almost anybody can call themselves a life coach. And then how do you, that makes me concerned.
Fine line. Yeah.
Yeah,
it is.
So that's where I'm like, most people, like a lot of people in lots of different areas can call themselves a counselor, like a school counselor, you know, a guidance counselor, but not everyone can call themselves a therapist. That's why I always use the term therapist to reiterate the fact that I'm licensed, that I'm regulated, and that I'm treating serious issues and that I take my job really seriously. And so I like to use the more formal term in my mind is therapist.
Yeah.
And so that's how I just make the distinction between therapist and counselor, because there can be like something called a licensed chemical dependency counselor, LCDC, and you only have to go for like a year and a half or something, like very little credits.
Yeah.
You know, it doesn't require like a master's degree and then 200 hours past that, and then you take a test and then you take another test, you know, blah, blah, blah. And so to me, words are powerful, and language is really powerful. And to me, I don't want to be blurry about my role. And so I always
think it's a stigma. You think it's a stigma attached to people think so they would rather say counselor than therapy. I like saying therapy because I mean, I think, but me, I have a healthcare background, so and I'm not ashamed that I go to therapy. So maybe that's the difference. I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't look at it like it's a bad thing. I look at it like,
yeah,
it's great if somebody recognizes they have a problem and they're seeking help for it versus like, you know, it ends up being your problem because they have problems.
Yeah. Or they just want something corrected. You know, they want to learn how to do something and correct it because they're tired. Like you said, the same thing happening over and over.
I got tired of myself. I was like, oh my God, like I'm sick of telling the stories. Like after a while, you're like, if I have one more crazy relationship, like, you know, and I'm just, you know, because anyone can play the victim and play like, oh, it's everybody else. But I'm the only common denominator. And so I really had to deal with myself.
Well, also you've had some traumatic things happen in your history. So those are kind of like we talked about before on one of the shows, you kind of take that with you in every relationship and you want to let go of that. You know, you want to
run quickly, fast.
Yeah. So it's good. But I've heard before that because life gets heavy, right? There's nobody on this earth can say everything's perfect. I'm happy as a clam. I have no problems. Nothing bad ever happens to me. Nobody can ever say that because if they say that, you're a liar. And so I've heard that you should at least go to therapy at least once a month, if not anything. You know, you don't have to go every week or every other day, but at least once a month or every other month to kind of let like
check in or
yeah, like
something.
not even check in, but just like kind of just release what
Okay.
you have going on.
Yeah, I agree with that. And I have clients that have committed to that. And I think
Mhm.
that's wonderful and lovely. I also can meet people where they're at if they're like, I get therapy in little like spurts, like little like packages. As long as it's consistent and as long as you're being really honest with yourself,
Oh yeah.
I think that's a great practice. And I agree. I mean, I'm biased, I'm a therapist, but I agree, like, you should have that as just part of your overall health.
Yeah.
And there's no point of going to therapy and lying to therapists. Like what?
Yeah, it's like, then why are you
Like what?
going? What's going to change?
Yeah, you're just wasting everybody's time. Yeah.
And I'm sure, because you've been in this field for a very long time, I'm sure you can see the exact moment when somebody opens up, when somebody's like, okay, and then that vulnerability just shines through. And I'm sure you can
Let me just
also
tell
tell when people are holding back.
Yes, I can. It's become something of a sixth sense. And
Yes.
so I always acknowledge and celebrate people's vulnerability.
Yeah.
I actually see that as a really big indicator of mental health. People being able to be vulnerable with themselves and with other people usually indicates a high degree of resilience and therefore overall better mental health.
Yeah.
So my whole role, I see, is to allow people to be their most authentic selves and be their most vulnerable.
Yeah, I think it's so that is, do you think a lot of trauma and just like issues that people have as adults are rooted in their childhood?
Yes. Yes,
Yeah,
there's a great study about that, and it's a study to measure trauma, and usually they only are talking about formative years. Although trauma we know trauma can happen at any point of your life, but a lot of trauma during zero, till you're around 18, growing up, gets normalized or dismissed as just like, that's just everybody has a rough time. Everybody, middle school's hard on everybody or whatever.
Yeah.
But when you really take time to be curious about it, most people have many forms of trauma while they're growing up.
Yeah. I also look at relationships as I've gotten older. What I have, the common denominator that I have seen also in myself, as well as just dating and stuff like that, is now and I've always like done it, but now I know why I do it. So like I always like when I'm dating like a new guy, I always ask about their mom. They're dead for sure, but I always ask about their mom because I want to know, what is your relationship with your mother? Because that's going to answer a whole lot of questions that I may have about you.
Yeah.
And then it also like tells about how you're going to treat me. Like, what is your relationship with your mom? And even me being, because I have 3 sons and my sons are adults, and as I look at them navigate their relationships with women, I know, and I have apologized to them for not doing what I needed to do as a mother all the time. Because some of that, like I can tell, like some of those things and how they react and how they, will maybe hold on or whatever. I'm like, oh, I didn't do what I needed to do because it just ends up being like an unhealthy type of relationship. And so I've apologized to all 3 of my boys for not being, because I'm a single parent. And so I wasn't able to sometimes be that nurturing mother that they needed.
She was
and
a
so,
young mama too. So
very young, at 19, I got pregnant with my first. And so, and then I just had them every other year. So then I ended up being like kind of more like I had to be I don't like to say the mom and the dad because that's impossible, but I just had to like be more of I was like, hey, I had to worry about stuff a lot, and I wasn't able to nurture as much as they needed, and stuff like that. So I think that I can look at my kids and tell, I didn't have time for hugs all the time. I'm like, I'm busy, I'm tired, and so when I hugged them as adults, sometimes my oldest was like, ugh, it feels weird, don't hug me. And I'm like, what? Because I just never really did it when they were little.
Yeah.
And then it just feels awkward. So then they end up being more like a needy adult, and so it's just, I did. I've had to apologize to my kids for that.
And let me tell you how rare it is for a parent to take that accountability and to actually do the repair work that is really needed. An apology is one of the most powerful things a parent can do. And it's very rare because the society, the pressure is the parent should always know what to do and the parent should be perfect. There's this real intense societal pressure of what it is to be a parent and especially what it is to be a mother.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Yeah, I felt not that everything was terrible, obviously. And because my kids, they around me, they talk to me, they love me, we hang out, we just like it's so super cool and it's just neat to be around them as adults. But I definitely have, I let them down in some areas. And so I've apologized. Because that's to me, that's the only thing that I don't want them, like for example, I don't want, even myself, I don't want drama and like chaotic things to become normal because you know this better than I do, Mr. Fit. Like they'll end up recreating it, not realizing they're recreating it because it feels normal, And so I like my house is peaceful. Yes, man, my house is peaceful. It's just because I want that to be normal. And so that way, when they get in an uncomfortable situation, like somebody's drama or crazy or yelling, they're like, "Ooh, this doesn't feel right." Yeah. Versus, okay, this is normal now. I'm comfortable.
Yeah. It feels so familiar. So, maybe this
right.
is
Yeah. And so I purposely made sure that they knew that, and I had more of a peaceful house. So I had order in my house, but I was, and then that was a big thing. We have to like take accountability for that because my kids are like me, and they don't hold back. Yeah, we're on a thread, so they send me memes about. You remember when Mom used to do that? Like, so most of my responses are whatever, like whatever, like the videos. But yeah, so that's counseling. Therapy has helped me. I tell you that.
That's great. That's really great.
Yeah, but I noticed that too. Like a lot of times, like my mom didn't hug us a lot growing up. My mom wasn't an I love you type of mom or anything like that. But I am. Like I'm always hugging Taviana. I'm always kissing her on her forehead. She still comes and she'll sit on my lap. Like she's very lovey too, because I just loved on her. And and I was like, I love you so much, babe. Like I tell her all the time. So that's what feels good for her. And so she actually just left a relationship of 6 years because he wasn't the type of person that she needed him to be. She would ask him, can you leave me notes, on the bed in the morning? So when I wake up, I can see it if you're gone, or can you just give me flowers? Like he wasn't doing any of that because he battles severe depression. And so he wasn't able to fulfill that for her because he wasn't able to fill his own cup. So she left the relationship because like, it's never going to change, And so she walked away from that because she wants to be loved on. She's, a physical touch, quality time. Like she loves being loved on because I'm always giving her hugs or telling her I love her or giving her kisses. And like you said, it's just learned. And so that's what feels comfortable to you. Yeah. And then you want that.
Yeah, that's interesting.
Yeah.
Thank you for tuning into I Talk Back with Rae and Mandii. Please hit the like and subscribe button to stay updated on future podcasts.